When my parents first told me we were moving into an old farmhouse out in the country, I thought it sounded peaceful. We'd spent years in the city, with its endless traffic and neighbors who barely looked you in the eye. The idea of a quiet place, surrounded by fields and trees, felt like a fresh start. My dad called it simpler living. The house itself sat on a hill overlooking acres of farmland that hadn't been touched in years. The paint was peeling, the windows were cloudy, and the wooden porch sagged just enough to creak under your feet. But there was something charming about it, like stepping back in time. At least, that's how it felt in the daylight. The first night, I noticed the quiet. Out there, when the sun set, the silence pressed in thick and heavy. No cars, no chatter, just crickets, the occasional rustle of wind through the fields, and the house. The house wasn't silent. I heard it when I went to bed. The walls made noises that weren't just the usual settling or pipes groaning. No, these sounded deliberate, like murmurs just low enough that I couldn't quite make out words. At first, I thought it was my parents talking downstairs. But when I crept to the hall, their bedroom door was shut, and the whispers seemed to crawl along the walls themselves. I told myself it was my imagination, moving stress. That's what anyone would think, right? But the next morning, I noticed something strange. My little sister, Emily, had left her crayons on the floor. Except instead of random scribbles, she'd drawn something across a long sheet of paper she taped together. A crude sketch of the house. And inside, the rooms were filled with little dark figures. Dozens of them. When I asked her why she drew it, she said, "They asked me to." I laughed it off because, what else do you do? But I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. That night, the whispers came again. Louder this time. They seemed to come from behind my headboard, like someone was pressed right against the wall, muttering secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. My chest went tight, and I pulled the blanket over my head, but it didn't help. The whispers followed. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up with a jolt of sunlight pouring through my curtains. For a moment, I convinced myself it had been a dream, but when I went downstairs, my mom's face was pale. She was staring at the kitchen wall, where something had been scratched deep into the plaster overnight. I leaned closer, and my stomach turned. It wasn't random scrawling. It was a word. "Listen." My dad brushed it off, saying maybe the wall had cracked with age. But I saw the grooves. They weren't cracks. They were claw marks. That day, I couldn't stop watching the walls. Every shadow looked wrong, like they shifted when I wasn't paying attention. Emily started humming to herself, a low tune I didn't recognize, while she played near the baseboards. When I asked what song it was, she said, "It's not a song. They're teaching me how to hum." I didn't ask who they were. I didn't want to know. By the third night, sleep was impossible. The whispers weren't just words anymore. They were voices. Dozens of them, all speaking at once, overlapping in a sickening chorus. some angry, some pleading, some laughing softly like they were in on a joke I couldn't hear. I pressed my ear against the wall once, just to prove to myself it was in my head. Big mistake. The voices stopped, dead silent. Then one voice, sharp, cold, right against my ear, whispered, "Found you." I stumbled back so hard I nearly knocked over my lamp. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. And worse, the wall was warm. The next morning, Emily was gone. We searched the house, the yard, everywhere. Panic ripped through me until I heard her giggle coming from inside the walls. I swear I heard her little voice, muffled, saying, "I like it here. They're nice to me." My parents tore through the house, convinced she was hiding. But I knew, the house had taken her. That night, I barely breathed. I sat awake, listening, waiting. The whispers filled the house again, but this time they were clearer, sharper, like they wanted me to understand. They said my name, over and over. I wanted to run, but where? Every corner of the house seemed alive, watching, listening. I couldn't even tell my parents. They already thought I was overly sensitive. So I'm telling you instead, right now, because I don't think I'll be here much longer. The whispers are louder as I'm speaking. They're filling the room, pressing against my skin, sliding under my door. Something's knocking inside the walls. Slow, deliberate, like knuckles dragging against the wood. And I swear I can hear Emily's voice again. Only this time, she doesn't sound like herself. She's whispering, "Come inside with me. It's better here, you'll see." When I heard Emily's voice coming from the walls, something in me broke. It didn't sound like her anymore. It was stretched, wrong, as if someone was trying on her voice like a mask. I pressed my hand flat against the wallpaper, and the warmth pulsed back at me like a heartbeat. "Emily," I whispered, my throat tight. The answer came instantly. "Come inside." I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair. My parents burst into the room, alarmed by the noise. But of course, by then the whispers had gone dead silent again. The walls stood blank and lifeless, as if mocking me. Mom crouched in front of me, her eyes wide with concern. What happened? I wanted to tell her everything, to scream about the voices, about Emily, about the thing pretending to be her. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out but a cracked, "She's in the walls." My dad's face darkened. "Enough. This isn't helping. Emily is hiding somewhere, that's all. We'll find her." But deep down, I knew we wouldn't. Not like this. That night, I refused to sleep. I sat on the floor, clutching a flashlight, staring at the walls. I told myself I'd keep watch, that I wouldn't let them take me the way they took Emily. But exhaustion has a way of breaking promises. I must have dozed off, because I woke to the sound of scratching. Not from the walls, this time from inside my closet. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it would shake the floor. Slowly, I lifted the flashlight and aimed it toward the door. The scratching stopped, Silence pressed down on me until I thought I'd suffocate. Then, with a soft click, the closet door opened an inch. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The beam of the flashlight trembled in my hand. Through the crack, a small pale hand slid out. A child's hand, Emily's. "Help me," her voice whimpered from the dark. I wanted to run to her, but something in my gut screamed. The hand wasn't right. Too thin. The skin was too loose, as though it had been stretched over bones that weren't hers. And then the hand bent backwards and pulled itself back inside. The closet door slammed shut. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat was locked shut as I bolted into the hallway. The house wasn't quiet anymore. The walls howled. The whispers rose in a chorus of voices, overlapping, shrieking, laughing, groaning, all at once. It was like being trapped inside 1,000 people, whispering directly into your skull. I ran to my parents' room, but the door wouldn't open. No matter how hard I shoved, it felt like something heavy was bracing against it on the other side. I pounded my fists until they went numb, screaming for them, but no one answered. Then, just as suddenly, the voices stopped. The silence was worse. A single knock echoed from the wall beside me. Slow, deliberate, then again, and again, like something was following me through the walls. I sprinted down the stairs, desperate for air, for escape. But when I reached the bottom, I froze. All the family photos that had been hung along the staircase were different. Where our smiling faces should have been, every single picture showed us asleep. Eyes closed, mouths slack, bodies limp, like we were corpses propped up for a photograph. And in every photo behind us, in the shadows of the house, were figures. Dozens of them. Black, faceless shapes that hadn't been there before. I ripped one frame off the wall and smashed it on the floor. My breathing ragged. But even the shards of glass reflected those figures, moving closer now, reaching out. That's when the front door slammed open. I jumped, spinning around. My dad stood there, wild-eyed, clutching Emily in his arms. She was filthy, trembling, whispering nonsense under her breath. For a split second, relief flooded me. She was alive. She was back. But then I saw her eyes. They were wrong. Too dark, too deep, as if the pupils had swallowed everything. And her lips were moving, whispering words that didn't belong to her. Words I couldn't understand. Dad staggered past me, carrying her upstairs. "She was in the barn," he said breathlessly. "Hiding in the barn." I didn't argue. I didn't say a word. But I knew she hadn't been in the barn. I knew what had climbed out of those walls wasn't my sister anymore. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening. The whispers didn't come from the walls this time. They came from Emily's room. Low, guttural voices rising and falling in strange rhythms. A language I couldn't recognize. Sometimes she answered them in that same language, her small voice weaving into theirs like she'd been speaking it her whole life. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. I wanted to believe she was just traumatized. But then I heard the floorboards creak outside my door. I turned, heart hammering, just in time to see Emily standing in the doorway. Her face was blank, her head tilted too far to one side. And in the dim glow of the nightlight, I could see her lips moving. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. It was the same one that had whispered through the walls on the very first night. "Found you." She stood in my doorway, her head cocked unnaturally to the side, whispering with a voice that didn't belong to her. That single phrase, "found you," was enough to root me to the bed. "Emily," my voice cracked. I wanted to believe I was talking to my little sister, but every instinct screamed I was. She didn't answer. Her lips kept moving, the words spilling out like static, wrong and broken. The whispers that used to crawl through the walls were now pouring out of her mouth. And then she smiled. It wasn't a child's smile. It stretched too wide, curling at the edges, filled with something gleeful and cruel. I grabbed the lamp off my nightstand, clutching it like a weapon. "Stay back," I shouted, though my voice shook so badly it barely sounded like a threat. For a moment, she froze in the doorway. Then, without warning, her body jerked forward like a puppet yanked on invisible strings. She didn't walk. She lurched, her limbs stiff, her head twitching as if something else was trying to remember how to use a body. That was enough for me. I bolted. I shoved past her, sprinting down the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the old wood. Behind me, I heard the thundering of small footsteps as she followed, laughing now, a high, sharp laugh that made my stomach twist. I tore downstairs and dove behind the sofa, gasping for breath. For a few seconds, the house went silent again. Then came the knocking. Not from her, from the walls. A slow, rhythmic pounding that echoed through every board and beam, shaking the pictures, rattling the windows. It wasn't random. It was coordinated, like hundreds of fists drumming in unison. And then it stopped. I peeked over the sofa. Emily was standing at the bottom of the stairs, completely still, her head tilted up toward the ceiling, as though listening to something. Slowly, her mouth opened wider and wider until her jaw hung slack, far too wide for a human face. From that gaping mouth came not words, but a deep, guttural groan that reverberated through the entire house. The walls answered. The whispers surged back all at once, angry, hungry, excited. And as they rose, I noticed something horrifying. The walls were moving. The wallpaper bubbled, the wood groaned, and pale shapes pressed outward, as if dozens of bodies were trapped inside, pushing against the surface, desperate to get free. Fingers, faces, open mouths, and all of them were whispering. I scrambled toward the front door, fumbling with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. No matter how I twisted, yanked, or shoved, it stayed frozen in place, as though the house itself refused to let me out. That's when I heard from my parents. Their voices drifted from the upstairs hall, calling my name. Relief flooded me for half a second before I realized something was wrong. They were perfectly in sync. Every syllable matched, like two recordings layered on top of each other. "Come upstairs," they chanted together. "Come upstairs." I backed away from the door, my pulse hammering. Emily snapped her head toward me, her eyes black pits now, her slack jaw still trembling. "Found you," she whispered again. And then she sprinted. I barely had time to react. I shoved a chair between us and bolted for the kitchen, slamming the door behind me. My hands scrambled along the counter until I found the one thing that felt solid in my grasp: a kitchen knife. I pressed myself against the wall, shaking, listening. The whispers didn't stop this time. They wrapped around me like smoke, pressing against my skull, filling me with images I didn't want of rotting faces, open mouths, endless darkness inside the walls. And beneath it all, one clear command: join us. The kitchen door creaked. Slowly, the knob began to turn. I raised the knife, ready to swing, but it was Emily who came through. It was my dad. He looked pale, disheveled, his eyes wide with fear. For the first time in days, I saw the man I actually recognized, not the voice-controlled puppet upstairs. "Come with me," he whispered urgently. "Now." I hesitated, the knife trembling in my grip. "How do I know it's really you?" Before he could answer, Emily's shriek tore through the house. The lights flickered, and every cabinet in the kitchen banged open at once. Dad grabbed my arm. His hand was warm, solid, shaking. "Trust me, we don't have much time." I let him pull me through the back door, one I swore had been locked before, and we stumbled out into the freezing night air. For the first time since we'd moved in, I felt like I could breathe. We ran toward the barn, our footsteps crunching against the dirt. I glanced back once and wished I hadn't. The house wasn't just sitting there anymore. It was breathing. The walls pulsed in and out, the windows stretched like eyes, and the roof groaned as though the whole structure was alive, watching us. Inside, shadows moved from window to window, following. When we reached the barn, Dad shoved the doors closed and dragged me behind a stack of hay bales. He collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. "What's happening?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "What's wrong with Emily? What's wrong with the house?" His face went pale in the moonlight. "It's not the house," he whispered. "It's what's inside it. The walls aren't keeping something out. They're keeping something in." I didn't want to hear the rest. My brain screamed at me to shut it out, to pretend this was just a nightmare. But his trembling voice pressed on. When Emily disappeared, I heard her voice in the barn. I thought I found her hiding, but he stopped, shaking his head. It wasn't her. It looked like her, but something came through her. Something that's been waiting here a very long time. My stomach turned. "Then where's the real Emily?" He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. And then scratching, not from the barn walls, from the ground beneath us. A muffled giggle floated up from the dirt. "Let me out," Emily's real voice whispered. I froze. Dad's eyes went wide, and he clamped a hand over his mouth, tears brimming in his eyes. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, until small pale fingers began pushing up through the packed dirt floor, clawing their way toward the surface. I dropped the knife. My heart was hammering so loud I could barely hear. Because if Emily was under the barn floor, then what the hell had we brought back into the house? Her voice came from beneath the barn floor. Emily's real voice. "Let me out." The sound froze me. My lungs refused to work, my body locked in place. Dad's hand trembled as he pointed at the ground, whispering, "Don't move, don't answer her." But the dirt shifted anyway. I watched, horrified, as pale fingers pushed up through the packed earth, clawing and scraping. Nails cracked, skin tore, but the hands kept digging. Then came her face. It was Emily, my real Emily. Her hair matted with soil, her eyes wide with desperation. "Please," she sobbed. "They put me down here. It's cold. I can't breathe." Every instinct screamed at me to help her. I crawled forward, reaching out. But Dad grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. His face was pale and wet with tears. "That's not her," he hissed. "It wants you to believe it is." But her little voice cut straight through me. "Don't listen to him. I'm your sister. Don't you recognize me?" I froze, torn between my father's warning and the undeniable truth in her voice. She looked like Emily. She sounded like Emily. And then she whispered something that shattered me. "Remember the song we made up when Mom yelled at us for sneaking cookies? You promised you'd never forget." My stomach dropped. That was real. No one else could have known that. Dad's grip faltered when he saw my face. "Oh God," he breathed. I wrenched my arm free and started digging with my bare hands, scooping away the dirt, ignoring the splinters and stones tearing into my palms. Emily reached for me, sobbing with relief. But just as our fingers touched, her eyes rolled back. Her mouth opened too wide, and a voice poured out. Not hers. Almost. The barn shook violently. Hay bales toppled. The wooden beams groaned as if about to snap. I fell backward as the ground beneath Emily collapsed, swallowing her whole in a wave of churning soil. The hole sealed itself shut, leaving no trace she'd ever been there. The whispers rose again, louder than ever, flooding the barn with laughter, screams, and prayers, all tangled together. Dad pulled me up, his eyes wild. "Do you understand now? The real Emily isn't gone. She's trapped. And whatever's wearing her skin in the house, it's feeding on us." I couldn't respond. My mind was still stuck on that one terrible word that came from beneath the dirt. Almost. Almost what? That night, we didn't dare go back inside. We huddled in the barn, shivering in the dark. Every so often, I'd hear scratching beneath the floor again, faint and irregular, like something packing just below the surface. I don't know when I fell asleep, but I woke to the barn door creaking open, and there she was. Emily stood framed in the moonlight, her hair neat, her dress clean, her smile wide and wrong. "Daddy, brother," she called sweetly, "come inside. Breakfast is ready." Her voice was perfectly normal, too normal. Dad didn't move, his hands clenched into fists. I noticed he was mouthing something under his breath, a prayer, maybe. Emily tilted her head. For a moment, her smile faltered. Then she said in a flat, mechanical tone, "You'll get sick if you stay out here. Come back inside." When we didn't answer, she stepped closer, her bare feet crunching against the dirt. Her voice dropped into a low growl. "You belong to the house." Dad grabbed my arm and pulled me deeper into the barn. But as we moved, a sound stopped us cold. The walls of the barn began whispering too. Not just the farmhouse, the barn, the trees outside, the very ground. The voices rose in a cacophony. "Join us, join us, join us." Emily giggled, her teeth glinting in the moonlight. "You can't hide out here. They're everywhere." Then she turned and walked back toward the house, her small frame swallowed by the darkness. The next morning, Dad made a decision. "We're leaving today before dark." But when we stumbled out of the barn, the world around us had changed. The road that led to town, gone. In its place stretched endless rows of corn, taller than they'd been yesterday, closing in around the property like a wall. No matter which direction we looked, east, west, north, south, the road was simply erased. "We're trapped," I whispered. Dad didn't answer. His face was ashen. That night, I sat awake, staring at the farmhouse from the barn window. Every light in the house was on. Shadows moved across the windows, dozens of them, though I knew only Mom and the thing wearing Emily were inside. Then the phone in my pocket buzzed. I froze. There was no service out here. There hadn't been since the day we moved in. But when I pulled it out, the screen lit up with a new voicemail. The number was my own. With shaking hands, I pressed play. At first, it was static. Then my own voice spoke. I let her in. The message ended. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My dad stared at me, horrified. What did it say? I couldn't bring myself to answer, because as I looked back at the farmhouse, I saw her, Emily, standing in the upstairs window, waving at me. But behind her was me, my own face pressed to the glass, eyes black, lips moving in a whisper I couldn't hear. When I saw myself standing in that upstairs window, everything inside me collapsed. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It wasn't my reflection. It was me. My face, my body, staring down with those bottomless black eyes. The thing beside Emily raised its hand and waved. So did my double. Dad yanked me back from the barn window before I could stare any longer. His voice cracked. "Don't look at it. That's how it gets in." But the damage was already done, because even after I turned away, I could still feel it in my head, like a second heartbeat pulsing behind my thoughts. We spent the day in silence. The whispers didn't stop, but they were different now. Focused, directed. Every so often, I heard my own voice mixed in with them, taunting me. By nightfall, Dad made another plan. "We're burning it down," he said. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling as he clutched an old gas can he found in the barn. "The house is the source. If we destroy it, maybe, just maybe we can end this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to any shred of hope. So together, we crept toward the farmhouse under the cover of darkness. The windows glowed faintly, though I knew we hadn't left the lights on. Shadows still moved inside, packing back and forth like caged animals. Dad poured the gasoline along the porch, across the siding, splashing it against the front door. The fumes burned my throat, but I didn't care. I just wanted it gone. "Ready?" he whispered. I nodded, clutching the lighter with shaking hands. But before I could flick the flame, her voice cut through the night. "Brother." Emily stood in the doorway, her little frame silhouetted against the sickly light spilling from inside. She wasn't smiling now. She looked tired, sad. "You can't leave me again," she whispered. I froze. Every part of me wanted to run to her, to scoop her up and drag her away from all of this. But Dad stepped between us, his voice firm. "That's not her." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Please, don't let him hurt me again." My grip on the lighter faltered. My heart screamed that it was her, that my sister was begging for me. And then, from behind her, another voice joined in. My voice. "Listen to her. Don't let him trick you. She's real. I'm real. He's the one who doesn't belong." Another me stepped out of the shadows. Same face, same voice, only the eyes were wrong. Dad shoved me back, raising the gas can like a weapon. "Run," he barked. But before I could move, Emily lunged forward. Her small hand grabbed my wrist, and suddenly the world shifted. I was back in the house, not the real one. This version was inside out. The wallpaper peeled like skin, the floors dripped with rot, and the walls pulsed with those same trapped faces I'd seen before. They moaned and whispered, their mouths stretching wide as I stumbled past. And there, at the end of the hall, stood Emily. But this time, she wasn't twisted. She wasn't wrong. She was my sister, dirt-stained, trembling, but alive. "Help me," she sobbed. I ran to her, scooping her into my arms. Her body was warm, solid. "I've got you," I whispered. "I won't leave you again." But as I turned, the hallway stretched longer and longer. No doors, no windows, just endless walls, whispering louder and louder. And then my double stepped out from the shadows, blocking the way. "Only one of you leaves," it said in my voice. Its smile widened until the skin of its cheeks split. Which one will it be? I don't know how long I stood there, clutching Emily, staring at myself. The whispers surged, pressing against my skull, begging me to give in. Dad's voice echoed somewhere far away, shouting my name, but it felt like he was 1,000 miles from here. My double stepped closer. Its eyes gleamed black, endless. "She doesn't belong to you," it hissed. "She belongs to us. So do you." And for a moment, I almost gave in. But then Emily whispered in my ear, soft, fragile, "Please don't let it win." Something snapped in me. I shoved her behind me and lunged at the thing wearing my face. We hit the floor, teeth bared, nails clawing. It was like fighting a mirror that knew every move before I made it. Its hands wrapped around my throat. My vision darkened. The whispers crescendoed until they became screams. And just as I thought I was slipping away, I heard Dad's voice again. Clear, powerful. Legio of HIM. Flames roared through the walls. Fire surged across the ceiling, devouring the whispers, silencing them one by one. My double shrieked, its face melting, its body twisting into smoke. And then everything went black. I woke up in the barn. Dad was crouched over me, his face streaked with soot, his hands raw from burns. Beside him lay Emily, unconscious but breathing. The farmhouse was gone, a smoldering ruin. For the first time in weeks, there was silence. No whispers, no voices, just the crackle of dying flames and the cool night breeze. Dad pulled me into a hug, trembling. "It's over," he whispered. "It's finally over." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But when I looked down at Emily, something in my chest turned to ice. Her lips were moving. Not words, just a soft hum. The same tune she said the walls had taught her. And then, as the wind shifted, I swore I heard it again. Faint, buried deep in the charred wood and smoking ashes. The whispers, waiting, and tell me in the comments, do you think burning the house really ended it? Or did something escape with us? Because some doors, once opened, never close. If you want more nightmares like this, make sure you subscribe, smash the like button, and share it with someone who would never survive one night in this farmhouse.